Kiki Smith was the kind of girl you would spot from a mile away, strutting into a high-end boutique with her designer handbag swinging by her side. Her aura was confidence mixed with privilege, and if you didn't already know her name, her expensive perfume would leave a lingering clue. She was her father's pride, the apple of his eye, and the envy of every girl who saw the kind of life she lived. Mr. and Mrs. Smith, Kiki's parents, were wealthy business people who believed in giving their only daughter the best of everything. Mr. Smith, a self-made billionaire, adored Kiki like she was his greatest treasure. He had always told anyone who cared to listen that Kiki was his reward for all the hard years he spent hustling in Lagos. "Anything my baby wants, she gets," he would say with a proud smile. Kiki grew up in comfort that bordered on royalty. Her family's mansion in Ikoyi was the kind that featured in glossy lifestyle magazines, with chandeliers glittering from the high ceilings and a garden so well kept it looked like something out of a painting. There were housekeepers for every task imaginable, one for the kitchen, another for cleaning, and even one who was responsible for walking the family's 2 dogs. Kiki never had to lift a finger. In her secondary school years, Kiki attended one of the most prestigious boarding schools in Abuja, a place where the children of Nigeria's elite were taught. During her holidays, she would fly back to Lagos to be pampered by her parents and spoiled with gifts. "School is stressful, Daddy," she would say with a dramatic pout. And like clockwork, Mr. Smith would pull out his debit card. By the time Kiki got into the University of Lagos, her life remained untouched by hardship. She stayed in the most exclusive hostel on campus and rarely mingled with anyone outside her social circle. Kiki didn't see the point in struggling like other students. After all, her parents provided everything she needed. Her days were filled with going out with her best friend, Lucy, and scrolling through Instagram for the latest trends. Lucy, the daughter of a wealthy oil magnate, was Kiki's closest confidant. The two of them were inseparable, often found giggling over coffee at fancy cafes or filming content for their growing Instagram followers. They both called themselves content creators, but everyone knew it wasn't about the money. For Kiki and Lucy, creating content was just another way to show off their glamorous lives. "Who needs a job when you can look this good for a living?" Lucy would joke, and Kiki would laugh along, nodding in agreement. But Kiki's easy life wasn't just funded by her parents. There was also Richard, her boyfriend of 3 years, who doted on her like she was a queen. Richard was everything a girl could dream of: handsome, ambitious, and generous. He had met Kiki at a charity gala where she'd been wearing a shimmering red gown that caught his eye from across the room. From that day, he was smitten, and Kiki knew how to use that to her advantage. "Babe, I want those new Louis Vuitton heels," she would casually say, and by the next day, they would be delivered to her doorstep. Richard was a businessman with a promising future, and though he worked hard for his money, he spared no expense when it came to making Kiki happy. Kiki's life seemed perfect to anyone on the outside. She was beautiful, wealthy, and had a man who adored her. But beneath the surface, there was something she lacked: a sense of responsibility. She had never had to work for anything in her life, and the thought of doing so seemed foreign to her. Cooking, cleaning, budgeting, these were things she had never even considered. One day, as Kiki lounged in the family's spacious living room, scrolling through her phone, Mrs. Smith walked in. "Kiki, Don't you think it's time you started learning a few things about running a home? You're not getting any younger, and soon you'll have a family of your own, her mother said gently. Kiki looked up from her phone with an expression of pure shock. Me? Run a home? Mummy, please? That's why we have staff, isn't it? Mrs. Smith sighed but didn't push further. She had tried over the years to encourage her daughter to be more independent, but Mr. Smith always shut her down. "Leave my princess alone," he would say. "She doesn't need to suffer like we did." And so Kiki remained blissfully ignorant of the responsibilities that came with adulthood. Her relationship with Richard seemed perfect on the outside, but even he had his concerns. While he adored Kiki's beauty and charm, he sometimes wondered if she was ready for the realities of marriage. He loved her, but he couldn't ignore the fact that she had never once offered to cook him a meal or even plan a date. Still, Richard convinced himself that these were minor issues. "She'll learn in time," he told himself. When Richard proposed to Kiki during a luxurious vacation in the Maldives, she couldn't contain her excitement. "Guys, look at this ring," she exclaimed during an Instagram live session, holding up her hand to show off the massive diamond. "It's giving everything it needs to give." Her followers flooded the comments with congratulations, and Kiki basked in the attention. The wedding was nothing short of a fairy tale. With 15 outfits, over 200 bridesmaids, and a guest list that read like a who's who of Nigeria's elite, it was an event that people would talk about for years. Kiki's parents spared no expense, ensuring that their daughter's big day was the grandest of all. "This is the wedding of the century," one guest remarked, and Kiki couldn't agree more. But behind all the glitz and glamour, a new chapter of life was about to begin, one that would test Kiki in ways she had never imagined. For the first time in her life, she would have to step out of her bubble of privilege and face the realities of marriage. As she danced with Richard under the glittering lights of their wedding reception, her mind was far from thoughts of responsibility. She was still the same Kiki, carefree, pampered, and completely unaware of what lay ahead. Little did she know, the road ahead would not be as smooth as the life she had always known. It would be filled with lessons, challenges, and a rude awakening that would force her to grow in ways she never thought possible. But for now, she was content in her bubble, blissfully unaware of how quickly life was about to change. Kiki woke up to the sound of her alarm blaring on a Monday morning. She reached out to silence it, groaning in frustration. The rich aroma of freshly brewed coffee didn't greet her as it had in her father's home, where the housekeeper always ensured her mornings began on a perfect note. Instead, there was silence, just the faint hum of the ceiling fan overhead. Her new apartment with Richard was nothing like the spacious mansion in Ikoyi. It wasn't shabby by any means. It was a luxurious 3-bedroom flat in Lekki, but for Kiki, it felt small and oddly quiet. There was no staff bustling around, no perfectly laid breakfast table waiting for her, just the two of them, and a kitchen that still smelled faintly of the spoiled leftover rice she had ordered 2 nights ago. "Richard," she called out, her voice tinged with irritation. "Where's the housekeeper? Why hasn't she come today?" Richard's voice came from the living room. "We don't have a housekeeper, Kiki. Remember? We agreed to start doing things ourselves for now." Kiki stood up, the reality of his words hitting her like cold water. She had agreed in the excitement of wedding preparations, brushing it off as one of those things couples said to sound responsible. But now, The full weight of it felt unbearable. How could she, Kiki Smith, live without house help? Dragging herself out of bed, she shuffled into the kitchen. The sink was piled high with dishes from the previous days, and the countertop was cluttered with cereal boxes and mugs. She wrinkled her nose. Richard, this is too much. How do people live like this? Richard appeared at the door, his tie half done and a cup of black coffee in his hand. Babe, it's not that hard. Just take it one step at a time. Start with the dishes, then make something simple for breakfast. Kiki crossed her arms. Dishes? Breakfast? Richard? I'm not a housemaid. Richard sighed but said nothing. He was learning to pick his battles with Kiki, and this didn't seem like one he'd win. All right, he said after a moment, placing the coffee on the counter. I'll take care of the dishes when I get back. Just make sure you eat something before you head out. Kiki stared at him, her frustration bubbling over. So you want me to cook? No, He paused, clearly choosing his words carefully. I'm saying you can grab something easy. Toast, maybe. You don't have to cook if you don't want to. Kiki shook her head as he left for work. This is not the life I signed up for, she muttered. Later that day, as Kiki sat scrolling through Instagram on the couch, a text from Lucy popped up. How's married life, babe? Living the dream, I bet. Kiki stared at the message, unsure how to respond. Should she tell Lucy about the dirty dishes, the lack of a housekeeper, and the mountain of laundry she had no idea how to tackle? Or should she keep up the facade that her life was as perfect as her Instagram feed? It's amazing, babe, she finally typed, adding a heart emoji for good measure. But the truth was far from amazing. The honeymoon phase had ended faster than she had anticipated, leaving her grappling with a life she wasn't prepared for. Cooking, cleaning, budgeting. These weren't things she had ever needed to think about. Now they loomed over her like insurmountable obstacles. The first real fight between Kiki and Richard came a week later. He had returned from work to find that she hadn't cleaned the living room or done the laundry as she'd promised. Kiki, I'm working all day, and I come home to this, he said, his voice calm but firm. Excuse me? Kiki snapped. Do you think I'm your servant? I don't know how to do these things, Richard. This is your fault for not hiring help. Richard sighed deeply, pinching the bridge of his nose. Kiki, we talked about this. We're building a life together, and that means learning to handle things ourselves. I'm not asking you to be perfect, but you can't just do nothing. The words stung more than Kiki wanted to admit. She felt helpless, like a child pretending to be an adult. But instead of admitting that, she lashed out. Maybe you should have married someone else if you wanted a maid. The room fell silent, the weight of her words hanging heavy in the air. Richard didn't respond immediately. He simply walked out of the room, leaving Kiki alone with her thoughts, and the growing realization that something had to change. That night, as she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, Kiki felt the first cracks in her perfect world. Marriage, she realized, wasn't just about love and Instagram-worthy moments. It was about sacrifice, compromise, and learning to stand on her own 2 feet. For the first time in her life, she wondered if she had the strength to do it. One quiet evening, the sun had dipped below the horizon, and the glow of the city lights filtered through the windows of Richard and Kiki's living room. Richard sat on the couch, his tie loosened and his face clouded with weariness. Kiki was sprawled on the other end of the couch, scrolling through her phone, engrossed in a trending gossip post about a celebrity breakup. Kiki, Richard said gently, breaking the silence. "Hmm?" she replied without looking up. "Can we talk?" His tone was soft but firm, the kind that made her put her phone down. "What's wrong?" she asked, her brows furrowing slightly. Richard leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. He ran a hand through his hair, a habit she'd noticed he did when he was trying to gather his thoughts. "I miss home-cooked meals," he said, his voice tinged with a mix of longing and frustration. Kiki blinked, confused. "But we've been ordering from the best restaurants, haven't we? You said you liked the jollof rice from that place in Vise." "I do," Richard admitted, "but it's not the same. There's something about a meal cooked at home, something warm and comforting. It's not just about the food, Kiki. It's about the effort, the love that goes into it." Kiki shifted uncomfortably. "You know I don't cook. I've never cooked in my life, Richard. What are you trying to say?" Richard looked at her, his eyes searching hers. "I'm saying I'd like you to try, just once. Make yam porridge for me, the way my mom used to." The request hit Kiki like a brick. She could hardly believe what she was hearing. "You're joking, right?" she asked, laughing nervously. "I'm serious, Kiki," Richard said, his tone steady. "Look, I'll make it worth your while. If you cook for me, I'll take you on a shopping spree this weekend. Anything you want, just please." The mention of a shopping spree made Kiki's ears perk up. She sat up straight, considering his words. "You'll take me anywhere I want?" "Anywhere," Richard promised, a small smile tugging at his lips. Kiki thought about it for a moment. She'd never stepped into a kitchen to do more than boil water for tea, but the idea of getting her hands on the latest designer bags and shoes was tempting. Besides, how hard could cooking yam porridge be? "Fine," she said finally, crossing her arms, "but don't say I didn't warn you if it doesn't turn out right." Richard's smile widened, and he reached out to squeeze her hand. "Thank you, baby. It means a lot to me." The next day, Kiki researched a detailed recipe and made a shopping list. As Kiki took one look at it, she sighed. "Palm oil? Bitter leaf? Where am I supposed to find all these things?" "I'll take you to the market," Richard offered, much to her surprise. "You to the market?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. Richard chuckled. "Don't worry, I know my way around. My mom used to send me to buy ingredients all the time." At the market, Kiki felt completely out of place. The noise, the bargaining, the smells, it was overwhelming. She clung to Richard's arm as he navigated the narrow aisles, picking out the best yams and negotiating prices with ease. She watched in awe as he interacted with the traders, his tone friendly but firm. By the time Richard dropped her off, Kiki was already exhausted. But Richard's encouragement gave her a small boost of confidence. She tied her hair back, put on an apron, and laid out the ingredients. "All right," she muttered to herself, staring at the recipe on her phone. "Let's do this." Richard watched from the doorway, trying not to laugh as she struggled to peel the yam. "You've got this," he said as he went back to his office. Kiki frowned in concentration as she diced the yam into uneven chunks. She added water to the pot and began tossing in the ingredients one by one. Palm oil, pepper, seasoning cubes. She followed the steps as best as she could, even though she wasn't entirely sure what she was doing. The aroma began to fill the kitchen, and Kiki felt a small surge of pride. Maybe this cooking thing isn't so bad, she thought. But when she tasted the porridge, her heart sank. It was bitter and bland, nothing like the delicious yam porridge she'd tasted before. Panic set in. What would Richard think? Then she remembered a tip she'd seen in one of her content creator friends' videos. Fanta adds sweetness to everything, they had said. Without thinking, she grabbed a bottle of Fanta from the fridge and poured some into the pot. When Richard came back from work and saw the look of nervous excitement on her face, he knew she had tried her best. "Dinner's ready," she announced, gesturing to the dining table. The dining table was set like a scene from a Nollywood movie. Kiki had gone all out because she had the most luxurious cookwares and dining sets money can buy, just to keep up with her social media aesthetics. The shiny plates, expensive silverware, and neatly folded napkins gave an air of sophistication. She even lit candles to make the atmosphere more romantic, though she knew the main attraction was her yam porridge. Kiki stood nervously by the table, fidgeting with her apron. She had rehearsed her lines in her head over and over. "I hope you like it, my love." It was the first time she had cooked for anyone, and she had poured every ounce of effort into it. Well, except for the part where she added Fanta to save the disaster she had tasted earlier. Richard walked into the dining room, still in his work shirt but without his tie. The aroma had hit him even before he reached the table. It was strong, spicy, and something else. He couldn't quite place it, but he chose to be optimistic. "Wow, this looks amazing!" Richard exclaimed, genuinely impressed by the effort Kiki had put into the presentation. Kiki smiled nervously. "I told you after tasting this, you'll spoil me with gifts," she said, trying to sound confident, though her heart pounded like a talking drum. Richard sat down and picked up his spoon. Kiki hovered nearby, watching his every move. He took his first spoonful, blowing on it gently before putting it in his mouth. The instant the yam porridge hit his tongue, Richard froze. His eyebrows furrowed as he processed the taste. It was bitter, overly spiced, and had a strange, sugary aftertaste. "What is this?" Richard blurted out, his voice louder than he intended. He reached for his water glass, gulping down the liquid to wash away the taste. Kiki's heart sank. "What do you mean? It's yam porridge, like you asked," she said defensively, though her voice betrayed her insecurity. "This is not yam porridge, Kiki. It tastes wrong. What did you put in this?" Richard demanded, his tone sharper than he had planned. Kiki folded her arms, trying to mask her embarrassment with irritation. "What do you mean? I followed the recipe. I even added Fanta to make it sweeter." Richard's eyes widened. "Fanta? You put soda in yam porridge? Kiki, who does that?" "Well, I saw it online. Some content creators use it in their recipes, and they said it makes food better." Kiki shot back, her voice rising. Richard dropped his spoon with a clatter and rubbed his temples. "Kiki, this isn't about Fanta. It's about the effort, real effort. Cooking isn't just about throwing things together and hoping for the best. It's about care, about wanting to make something special for someone you love." His words stung. Kiki felt like a child being scolded, and she hated it. "Oh, so now I'm the bad wife because I didn't grow up cooking like your mother, right? Maybe you should have married someone else who fits your idea of a perfect wife," she snapped, her eyes brimming with tears. "That's not what I'm saying, Kiki," Richard said, his voice softening. "I just want us to build something together. I'm tired of ordering takeout every day. I miss the little things, like sitting down to a home-cooked meal. Is that too much to ask?" Kiki stared at him for a moment, her defenses crumbling. But instead of admitting her shortcomings, she turned on her heels and stormed out of the dining room. "If you don't like it, don't eat it," she muttered under her breath as she climbed the stairs to their bedroom. Richard sat alone at the table, the untouched porridge staring back at him. He sighed deeply, pushing the plate away. He wasn't angry, just disappointed. He loved Kiki, but moments like this made him wonder if she truly understood what marriage meant. Upstairs, Kiki paced the room, her emotions swirling. She felt humiliated, but more than that, she felt a pang of guilt. Deep down, she knew Richard wasn't asking for much. He wasn't trying to change her. He just wanted a partner who could meet him halfway. But Kiki wasn't ready to face that truth. Instead, she picked up her phone and called Lucy. "Can I come over? I need some air," she said, her voice trembling. "Of course, babe. My door is always open," Lucy replied. And just like that, Kiki packed a small bag and left the house, leaving Richard to wonder if their love was strong enough to overcome their differences. Kiki knocked on Lucy's door, her overnight bag slung over her shoulder. It wasn't the first time she had come here seeking refuge, and Lucy's home always felt like a safe haven. Lucy opened the door, her face lighting up with what seemed like genuine concern. "Kiki, what happened? You look like you've been crying," Lucy said, pulling her friend inside. "It's Richard," Kiki said with a sigh, dropping her bag on the floor and sinking into the plush couch. "He doesn't appreciate me. I tried to cook for him, and he made it seem like I ruined his life or something." Lucy handed Kiki a glass of chilled water and sat down beside her. "Men can be so ungrateful. After all you've done for him, he should be lucky to have a wife like you," Lucy said, her voice dripping with sympathy. Kiki nodded, the words soothing her bruised ego. "Exactly. He knew who I was before he married me. I don't know why he's suddenly expecting me to become some kind of housewife." As Kiki vented, Lucy's mind raced. She had always admired Richard from a distance, the way he carried himself, the way he treated Kiki like a queen. But recently, she had started to wonder what it would be like to have a man like him in her life. And now, seeing the cracks in their seemingly perfect marriage, Lucy felt an opportunity opening up before her. "Kiki, maybe he's just stressed," Lucy suggested. "You know men can be unreasonable sometimes, but if he keeps acting this way, you might need to show him that you won't tolerate disrespect." Kiki sipped her water and nodded. "You're right. I'll just give him some space and let him realize he's wrong." That night, Lucy prepared dinner for Kiki, all the while plotting her next move. She knew Kiki would stay for a few days, and that gave her the perfect chance to get closer to Richard. The next day, while Kiki was still asleep, Lucy dressed carefully, choosing a fitted dress that accentuated her curves. She packed a container of jollof rice and fried plantains, one of Richard's favorite meals, and headed to his office. When she arrived, Richard looked up from his desk, surprised to see her. "Lucy, what are you doing here?" Lucy smiled sweetly, holding up the food. "I heard Kiki left, and I thought you might need a home-cooked meal. I know how stressful work can be." Richard's brow furrowed. "Kiki told you we had a fight?" "She didn't need to," Lucy said, placing the container on his desk. "I just thought I'd help out. You deserve someone who takes care of you." Her words hung in the air, heavy with implication. Richard felt uncomfortable but didn't want to be rude. "Thank you, Lucy. That's very thoughtful," he said cautiously. Lucy lingered, leaning on his desk. "You know, Richard, if you ever need someone to talk to, I'm always here." Richard stood up, signaling that the conversation was over. "I appreciate the food, Lucy, but I think it's best you leave now." Lucy's smile faltered, but she quickly recovered. "Of course, just remember what I said." As she walked out of the office, Lucy felt a pang of frustration. Richard hadn't taken the bait, but she wasn't ready to give up. Over the next few days, Lucy tried everything. She sent Richard flirty text messages, dropped by his house unannounced with more food, and even started wearing more revealing outfits around him. But Richard remained steadfast. Kiki noticed Lucy has been cooking lately. "Lucy, who are you cooking for, looking happy and all smiley?" Kiki looked surprised. "It's for my future husband. I mean the father of my unborn child," Lucy said. "Okay, I can't wait to meet this mystery man of yours." A few hours later, Lucy left with a lunchbox. In the evening, Kiki decided it was time to go back home. She had been waiting for Richard to call, but when he didn't, she realized she needed to confront him. The next day, determined to surprise Richard, Kiki showed up at their home unannounced. She walked in without knocking, and what she saw made her blood run cold. Lucy was standing too close to Richard, her hand resting lightly on his shoulder. "Lucy?" Kiki's voice was sharp, cutting through the room like a knife. Lucy spun around, her face pale. "Kiki, this isn't what it looks like." But Kiki didn't wait to hear her excuses. She turned and ran out of the living room, tears streaming down her face. "Kiki, wait!" Richard called after her, chasing her down the hallway. When he finally caught up to her, Kiki turned to face him, her eyes filled with pain. "How could you? With my best friend?" Richard shook his head. "It's not what you think. She's been throwing herself at me, but I've never encouraged her. I would never betray you, Kiki." Kiki looked into his eyes and saw the sincerity there, but her trust had been shaken. She left without another word. Back at Lucy's apartment, Kiki packed her things in silence, her mind racing. She realized now that Lucy had never been a true friend. But as much as it hurt, she knew she couldn't let someone like Lucy destroy her marriage. This betrayal was a wake-up call. It was time to fight for her relationship and become the wife Richard deserved. Kiki packed her belongings and headed back to her matrimonial home. While in the Uber, she recounted how her marriage is on the verge of being broken and how she can be a better wife to Richard, who cherished her so much. When she got home, she knocked on the door, and Richard opened the door and hugged her immediately. "I would never cheat on you." "I know," Kiki said, "but we need to talk." As Kiki clasped her hands together, trying to steady them. "I've made mistakes, Richard. Big ones. And I know I've hurt you, even though I never meant to." Richard's expression softened, but he said nothing, letting her continue. "I didn't grow up seeing what a good marriage looks like," she admitted, her voice cracking. "I thought marriage was all about being adored, being taken care of. But I never thought about what it means to take care of someone else. I didn't think about you." Richard opened his mouth, but Kiki held up a hand. "Please, let me finish. I've been selfish, Richard. I thought being your wife was enough. I thought if I just showed up, everything else would fall into place. But it doesn't work that way, does it?" Tears welled in her eyes, but she blinked them away. "You've been patient with me, more than I deserved. And instead of appreciating that, I pushed you away. I expected you to fix everything while I did nothing. But I see it now, Richard. I see what I've been doing wrong." Richard stood up, his face a mixture of pain and hope. "Kiki, I've never stopped loving you. Even when we fought, even when things felt impossible, I never gave up on us. But it's been hard, so hard, watching you struggle and feeling like I'm the enemy." Kiki wiped her cheeks, nodding. "I know, and I'm sorry. I want to do better, Richard. I want to be better, for you, for us." Richard walked over to her, his steps slow and deliberate. He reached out, his hands gentle as they rested on her shoulders. We both made mistakes, my love. Marriage isn't easy for anyone. It's messy and it's hard, and sometimes it feels like we're failing. But the fact that you're here saying these things, it means everything to me. Kiki let out a shaky laugh. I was so scared you wouldn't want to try anymore. Richard shook his head. Giving up has never been an option for me. I married you because I believed in us, and I still do. But we can't just go back to how things were. We need to work on this together. She nodded. I want that too. I know I have a lot to learn, but I'm ready. I want to listen, to understand what you need, and to figure out how we can be happy again. Richard pulled her into a hug, and for the first time in months, Kiki felt a sense of peace. His arms around her were firm but comforting, a reminder that she wasn't alone in this. When they finally pulled apart, Richard smiled, a glimmer of the man she had fallen in love with shining through. How about we start with dinner tonight? At home, together? Kiki smiled back. That sounds perfect. Richard offered to register her in a cooking class. She agreed and started making delicious delicacies like she has been cooking for decades. She also agreed to start a business by using her social media audience to support her family. After having breakfast on a Saturday morning, as they cleaned up, Richard took her hand. Kiki, thank you for coming back, for trying. I don't expect perfection. I just want us to keep choosing each other every day. Kiki squeezed his hand. I promise, Richard, I'll choose us no matter what. And with that, they began the long journey of rebuilding their marriage, one step at a time. It wasn't perfect, but it was theirs, and that was enough.
I hope you enjoyed the story. If so, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. And don't forget to turn on the notification bell for more stories like this one. Goodbye.